Hey, continuing with my Western-themed fantasy setting, I want to talk about the barbarian tribes that live here, or as they refer to themselves, the Urgron people. I'm going to cover some of the more unique tribes, but just know that these aren't the only ones. The first on the list is the Rockthon tribe. During the rebellion against the dragons 70 years ago, some of the Urgron tribes sided with the dragons, while others sided against them. One of the tribes to defy the dragons was the Rockthon. Their claim to fame is that, during this rebellion, one of their champions was able to kill a dragon by hurling his axe at its head as it flew by for a strafe run. Since then, the Rockthon have incorporated two things into their culture: weapon throwing and dragon magic. After killing the dragon, they harvested its body and used it to practice a kind of dragon sorcery. They imbue their magic with parts from dragons: scales, bones, fangs, sometimes in ritualistic ceremonies, other times for more practical combat applications. They don't necessarily worship dragons as gods, but they consider them as sacred creatures, given the fact that the scraps from their corpses can empower the Rockthon's magic. In terms of combat, some of the Rockthon are able to use this dragon sorcery to take on different aspects of dragons. They can create spectral scales around their body, like armor, or do breath attacks similar to the different colors of dragons, or give themselves increased strength and speed. For the ritualistic side, they have a tradition of hosting a free-for-all battle royale where their warriors compete for the title of Living Dragon. The elder shaman of the tribe will imbue the winner of this bloody competition with the strongest of their magics. The winner must consume things like ground bone dust or blood from dragons, as the shaman surrounds them with their most powerful dragon pieces. The living dragon is given enhanced powers and acts as the champion of the tribe. They can activate elemental energy on their weapons to do more damage, and even instantly teleport their weapons back to them after throwing them. While they are the strongest warrior, they aren't always the leader of the tribe. The current leader of the Rockthon is a truly massive dwarf, measuring 6 feet tall, named Kato. He is an abnormality for dwarves. The last thing I'll mention about the Rockthon, and I'm gonna do this for every tribe, is to recommend some D&D subclasses, since this is part of my Dungeons & Dragons world. I'd say that the people in this tribe are a mix of the Path of the Giant Barbarian and the Draconic Bloodline Sorcerer. So if you'd like to do anything with that, there you go. Next, we have the Krovasi tribe. These are worshippers of Fargalis, a blood god in my setting, and also the progenitor of vampires. A long time ago, when the verdant landscape began to give way to arid desert, many of the Urgron tribes migrated elsewhere, or were wiped out, either by the increasingly harsh conditions or the growing competition from other tribes. In their desperation for survival, the Krovasi turned to the worship of Fargalis. As a god of blood, Fargalis can grant boons and powers to his followers, but at a heavy cost. For every blessing, blood must be spilled. Sometimes any blood will do. Other times, it must come from those involved in the ritual. The Krovasi are always performing these rituals, whether it's a small cut on themselves to ensure a good hunt, or a multi-body sacrifice in preparation for a big battle. Because of this, many of the members of this tribe are covered in scars and cuts from the bloodletting. Also, compared to other tribes, the people of the Krovasi are usually much more pale from all the blood loss, especially the ones with fair skin. I think they would also tend to be more active around dusk or night because of their sunlight sensitivity, or at the very least, they cover up more during the day. They're not vampires, but they do inherit some of those vampiric traits from their association with Fargalis. But what exactly are these blessings granted to them? The blood in their blood magic refers to the cost, rather than the magic itself, though I imagine some of them are able to manipulate blood. Whatever magic they use can be increased in power, if the right price is paid. One of their primary forms of magic is the use of hexes and curses on their enemies. They can also increase their physical traits too, or perform certain skills or tasks better. But that's just the lower end of their power. During an extremely dry year, the Krovasi were once able to summon a rainstorm through a mass sacrifice of over 100 people. However, feats like this are rare. While Vargalis demands his blood price for every act, he can't simply be bought. Sometimes he might ignore an offering, or deem the sacrifice as insufficient. And even when he does perform grand feats like that, they're done in a manner befitting his judgment, on his timetable. For the subclasses, I think the closest matches would be Order of the Profane Soul Blood Hunter and the Path of the Zealot Barbarian. The final tribe I'm going to cover is the Gordasa. None of the tribes in West Otria are strangers to violence, but while most of them fight to live, the Gordasa live to fight. Conflict, combat, and competition are the core tenets of this tribe. To them, existence is conflict, so they might as well be good at it. The warriors in this tribe train to be some of the most skilled fighters in West Otria, to the point where many of the other tribes will think carefully before engaging in combat with them. Resources can be scarce in certain parts of the Otrian desert. This has led the Gordasa to have the "only the strong survive" philosophy. Existence must be earned, and is only allowed to the deserving. They have frequent duels in fighting pits, sometimes as training matches, other times battles to the death. This serves two purposes. The first is that, because of the resource scarcity, they don't want their resources to be wasted on the weak. These death matches weed out the undeserving, which leads to the second purpose. This is how they produce their strongest fighters. The Gordasa are always looking to test themselves against worthy opponents, so while they aren't exactly thrilled about East Otria's orc army coming into this region to take territory, they're practically salivating at the opportunity to face this new foe. However, the former leader of the Gordasa, Hirog, died in the last major battle between the Urgron tribes and the East Otrian forces. This was seen as a worthy death, but Hirog was the leader of not just his own tribe, but the entire coalition of Urgron tribes. This power vacuum caused a bit of chaos and infighting among the tribes, so the coalition collapsed from within, giving the East Otrian orcs the leverage needed for several of the Urgron tribes to accept their treaty. I'll talk about that treaty in the next video about the orc military, so let me give some info about Hirog instead. While he may have died as the most respected and militarily powerful Urgrani, he began his journey as a lowly thrall for the Gordasa. Within this tribe, thralls can earn their freedom by voluntarily competing against other thralls in gladiator-style matches. If they prove themselves enough, then their owner will recognize their strength and grant them their freedom. Sometimes they leave in search of a better life elsewhere. Other times they stay with the Gordasa and continue to sate their lust for battle. This is exactly what Hirog did. He climbed his way through the ranks of thrall fighting, and after gaining his freedom, he again climbed the ranks of the Gordasa hierarchy. He became their strongest warrior, and when it came time for the Urgron to combine their forces against the orcs, Hirog was the natural, proven choice for the High War Chief. As a side note, I should mention that this philosophy of only the strong survive doesn't apply to every person in the tribe. They still have regular people like farmers and craftsmen and such. It's just that their warriors are held to a very high standard. For the subclasses, members of this tribe would probably be a mix of the Path of the Berserker Barbarian and either the Battle Master or Champion archetype fighter. So, that's all of the tribes for now. But there are still some things that are common across most of the Urgron's culture. The native population of West Otria consists of humans, dwarves, and Goliaths. There are probably a few other races that are native, but in the extreme minority. As I mentioned earlier, the Gordasa make use of thralls, or slaves, to carry out certain tasks or labor. Many of the Urgron tribes also engage in this practice, though for different purposes sometimes. Outside of combat, the Urgron also practice many of the roles you would expect with any kind of civilization. There are farmers in the spots of the desert with enough water to allow for crops, healers and shamans to keep their people healthy, and craftsmen to make their weapons, tools, and supplies. I like the idea of the Urgron being good at salvaging and repurposing things, whether it's old relics from their ancient kingdoms or trophies won from battle. The last thing I want to go over is the Urgron's relationship with the Biren Road and the free city of Kalistad. Under the rule of the dragons, the Urgron were prohibited from raiding or attacking the coastal city. It's not part of Otria, but a lot of commerce and trade flows through there. The dragons massively enjoyed wealth, so they tried to maintain a friendly relationship with Kalistad. After the dragons were overthrown and the Urgron had their independence, tensions and concerns rose over possible barbarian attacks on the free city. The wealthy merchant lords of Kalistad were not fools, however, so they chose to go in the direction of negotiation rather than hostility. The Urgron are always in need of supplies, so many of the tribes were welcome to trade at fair prices or even barter with merchants from the city. In exchange, those tribes would not attack the city or its surrounding territory, and they would also help to keep the other tribes in check if some of them got any ideas about breaking this deal. This agreement held for decades, until forces from East Otria began to encroach on Urgron territory. As colonizers, troops, and trading caravans started to follow along the Biren Road, many of the tribes started to assault or rob these trespassers when the opportunities arose. For any caravans or traveling merchants, the Urgron raiders would usually just rob them if they weren't protected enough. Sometimes the Urgron would let the merchants pass unharmed if they paid a toll, but the Urgron would also sometimes just take everything and resell what they couldn't use. After the treaty, several of the tribes agreed to cease these hostile activities. Of the three I mentioned earlier, only the Rockthon agreed to this treaty. While they aren't exactly on friendly terms with the East Otrians, relations have improved a bit, and the two sides are learning to cooperate with each other. The Krovasi and Gordasa are still openly hostile to anyone from East Otria. If you watched the last video, you might remember that this video was supposed to have barbarians and orcs, and there seems to be a distinct lack of orcs in this one. Originally, the plan was to have both sides, but I kept getting more and more ideas about the Urgron tribes, which caused the video to get a little longer than I intended. So ultimately, I split them up. This one was more about the sword and sorcery side with the barbarians, but the next one will be about the orcs and the western elements. Anyways, see you next time.